Right, it gives me enormous pleasure to introduce you to Music Venue Trust patron and enormous supporter of what we do, Mr. Steve Lamacq, and his panellists for the morning.
Oh, good morning. If I've ever got into one of your venues on a guest list and you thought, bloody freeloader, here he comes again, does nothing, this bloke just turns up, stands at the bar. Well, this is what we call payback. It was my 54th birthday yesterday. I know. And I'm feeling it. And that's why we're here today, I think, is because Mark managed to organise this the day after, knowing that I would bring my hangover with me. Anyway, thank you very much for coming. Welcome. Thank you to the Music Venue Trust for having us back. In the next hour and a bit, we present the Magnificent Seven, or as it's been dubbed at our house, the Magnificent Six and the Barely Adequate One. So we're going to be talking about the stories of 6 venues that are all celebrating anniversaries this year. We're going to bring our guests out in a second. We're going to do it from the newest venue to the oldest venue. So we're going to finish with Jeff from the 100 Club, who's got a meeting at 1:30, so his first anecdote will finish definitely by that point. So, without further ado, we'll start with someone celebrating their first year this year from the Fiery Bird in Woking. Please welcome Elaine McGinty. Oh, this is going to be good. This plastic chair, this is going to be, grab yourself a microphone. I say this is going to be good because in an email which Elaine sent us earlier on this week, when I just want to confirm a couple of points. She described one of the council officials she's been talking to about the venue as one of the blue meanies from Yellow Submarine. Welcome. What's your background? I mean, you worked in community stuff, development, didn't you?
Yeah, that's really what it was. We were a band with no venue to play, and I was a community worker in the town. And it's regenerating, but people were telling us that the projects I was doing that they felt left behind, and we just thought that putting the, 2 and 2 and 4 and 5 together, that to have a venue that welcomed everybody day and night would be the solution.
So how did you go about that? Because this is an amazing story, because you've ended up opening a venue or opening a club in a venue which you know is already going to be demolished.
Yeah, but if you've got nothing to lose. So we had to do it, because if we didn't, it would draw the line under a venue at all. And not only, it wasn't just about what we were doing, it might make it difficult for anybody else wanting to try and do something that came from the grassroots up, rather than, there's nothing wrong with regeneration when it's balanced, but when it was starting to look like Gatwick Airport Lounge, and there was nothing that was the identity of the town in there.
So how did it come about? Tell us about the venue that you've started working in and how you managed to get hold of it.
Well, first of all, we were just doing it in the street and different pubs and cafes and stuff around the town, just putting on original music. And then we managed to negotiate with a shop landlord, and we took over a shop for 6 months, but turned into 5 years, where we had acoustic work and we taught people, we had charities come in and teach people job skills and how to get on the internet. All that time, we'd done a petition to the council that was accepted by the councillors, and a lot of them have been really on board. But the council kept saying, we haven't found anywhere. Then the chief executive went on camera and sort of totally slagged us off, and suddenly they found a venue a week later, and it was a 1,000 capacity venue.
And when did you take this over, and what state did you find it in?
Well, they offered it to us in 2016. The first year, we didn't realise they were negotiating. They didn't own it, or had asked the owners, so that was a total waste of time. Then another year went by. I think they thought we were going to give up and go away. And just as we were thinking of doing that, they went, all right, we'll complete. And the electrics hadn't been tested for years, so that cost $10,000. They did give us a small grant for refurb, but it just got blown by all that. The wires were hanging out. There was vomit behind some of the bars, and stuff like that. It was lovely. So we were going to do an organic shop from that. But yeah, so it was in a real state, and we've not done much because obviously it's getting knocked down, but we did get a small grant from the county council, and we bought a sound system because the reason was we're a band, and we know the main thing is that you want good sound and nice people where you go, so that's what we built the whole thing around.
Doesn't give you long though to get up and running, does it? And particularly it's a very large space if you've got a 1,000 capacity venue that you've got to start booking from scratch immediately, virtually.
It is a very large space, and because they wouldn't give us proper completion dates, we couldn't do a diary ahead. We had to take it over, open it in May and just go from the ground running. But we can't treat it as a large space. We have to treat it as a 50 capacity. We've got a social impact task that we've set ourselves as well. So we have to let the new bands, local bands, emerging bands use it, and even if they bring no one, we've got to pay the fixed bills on it. We've got to pay 20% of all the utilities of the whole complex, which includes a hotel, a nightclub, bowling alleys. So yeah, what we've got to do is try and get promoters to take it on a larger basis, so that we can then put anything that comes from that back into the community and the emerging music.
I mean, this really does sound like it's a crusade, this. I mean, it's a brilliant thing to do, but this sounds like the epitome of a labour of love.
Well, I won't say there's any more. Yeah, I suppose it is really. It's like when you know something, you can't unknow it. You can't not do it. And it's really because some people were moaning because there was a photograph exhibition of Paul Weller's photos in Lawrence Watson's photos in the museum, and people had asked Paul Weller about, is there a venue? And he, not really, like a lot of towns, he wasn't moaning. And then and people were kind of, why doesn't he do one? And we thought, well, why don't we do one? Why do you have to wait for someone else? You don't need permission. And as it turns out, you don't need any money because we haven't got any.
What's been the reaction from the local community then in Woking? I mean, do you feel like you're getting their support and that it really means something?
It does. It really does mean something, because I mean, some of the things are tiny. Like the open mic is tiny, you might get 20 people, but a guy who's got dementia will come and sing a song on his own, and somebody that's never gone out before will start coming because we've got the connections in the community. They'll start coming out. Woking's a very diverse town, and one of the other points of the venue is that we don't have a cultural centre, so we wanted somewhere to bring all the communities together. There's quite fractured in terms of not necessarily different ethnicities and faith, but different incomes. We've got very wealthy town, but it's got pockets of deprivation that amongst the highest in the country, and people just felt left out. The council estate's being totally demolished, and we just needed somewhere people could come, and it didn't really matter whether they were rich or poor. Mental health doesn't care, so we just it means a lot to us, and it means a lot to the people that are involved.
So what's your ambition? What's the plan for the future then? Get as much out of this as you possibly can, and then what happens?
There's two things. I've got my eye on a massive building that costs millions and a plot of land as well. So we're gonna try and get that going. No, sorry, I haven't said to Joe yet, who's in the audience, co-founder. Anyway, he'll come round. And Eddie as well. So it's to make something permanent that's owned by the community forever. And it's written into the deeds that it can't be taken back. And, you can only give it a try. It keeps me out of the bingo, so.
Your best moment so far of being involved in this amazing story then? What's the best bit?
I think it's seeing people who've never performed before, or people who couldn't afford to learn music, guitar and stuff like that, to go through that process and then step up on the little stage. And it is lovely to have the bigger bands in touch and stuff, but really it's people who never went out, and now they go, not just to our place, they now follow artist rounds, and they go to the venues in Guildford and Aldershot as well.
Elaine McGinty, everybody.
Thank you.
Our second guest joins us from the Oh Yeah Centre in Belfast, which is a decade old this year. It's Chief Executive Charlotte Dryden. Chief Executive.
I didn't choose that. I run the OES Centre.
For everyone, for anyone who doesn't know really what the OES Centre is, the sort of ethics and the drive behind the OES Centre and how it started.
Yeah, well, OES is a dedicated music hub in the Cathedral Quarter in Belfast. We've been going for just over 10 years. And the idea was formulated over a pint between our former and co-founder Stuart Bailey and Gary Lightbody from Snow Patrol. And the idea went from, those pints to, will we do this thing? And a wee bit of lobbying with government, but it really didn't work. So it was, let's just do this ourselves. Found this 3-story building warehouse that was formerly inhabited by whiskey warehouse, and it was also a distribution centre for show bands and that kind of things. And there was actually a recording studio in the building. So anyway, long story short, around 2008, we formed the organisation as a charity and a social enterprise. And the Paul Hamlin Foundation were probably one of our early supporters, along with a little bit of help from Snow Patrol. And it kind of went from there. And now it's become 7-day-a-week operation. The venue is the beating heart of the hub, and within it we've got rehearsal rooms. We hire or sublet offices to music businesses. So there's a record label, there's a studio in the building, and then the Oh Yeah as an organisation, we do talent development, we do music tourism. We do youth events, under 18s gigs, and everything that we do is very much about local music, grassroots music. So it's all about the new talent coming through and celebrating some of the big names that have come through as well, and kind of trying to instill a bit of pride.
Do you think that it's a direct result, or at least partly a result of the OES Centre being there, that there has been this upturn in musical activity and artists emerging from Belfast?
I'd like to think that we've played a small part in the development of some names that are coming through. I think we're still looking for the big breakthrough in Northern Ireland, who's the next Snow Patrol. But there's some really great talent coming through, and they're doing it themselves a lot more now. And the other thing I think that's really important is there's quite a few new managers coming through in Northern Ireland. That was what was really lacking. So yeah, I think we've played our part, and I think within the area that we're in, the Cathedral Quarter ourselves and the Black Box, it's become quite a gentrified area. The tourists are moving in, which is great. But it's becoming very expensive, lots of restaurants, but we're kind of keeping the original live music thing going.
You mentioned some of the other initiatives that you've been involved in starting as well, which obviously embrace, I suppose, different forms of music, encourage different people. You did a Women's Week, didn't you, at the OES Centre?
Women's Work?
Women's Work, sorry.
Yeah. So that was kind of inspired by a Jessica Hopper interview with Bjork, where she said women were invisible. So every International Women's Day, we kind of put on an event, and we did a night dedicated to Bjork and that kind of thing. And it kind of evolved into 3 days, and then it turned into a festival. So now I run a festival called Women's Work with an amazing team of people of all genders. And it's become a really big annual program. And probably up until about 4 years ago, I would say 15% of the people that used the building in terms of musicians, bands on stage, 15% were women, but that's very proudly, I can say that's about 45% now, and I think it's because of that festival. So there's a lot of development work within the Oh Yeah and the venue, as I say, is that beating heart of it all.
Do you think, originally, obviously, the OES Centre starts because there's nothing there. There's no place for people to go and play and talk, and just mix with other people. So it starts like that, but do you think now it's becoming increasingly more of a catalyst, if you like? Now it's getting more involved in changing the shape of music?
The OES Centre? Yeah, we run a festival called Sound of Belfast, which is about celebrating what's great about Belfast music, and the idea for that is to try and turn the spotlight up on the local music scene a little bit brighter for sort of a week across November. We have funders and industry partners that will come to us and ask us and get recommendations from us on what's coming through, who's breaking through. So we've definitely had played a part in probably some of the breakthrough artists in small ways, from like little recommendations to getting them gigs at festivals, that kind of thing.
Yeah. Now it's a decade on. Can you imagine Belfast without it?
No, I hope not. I mean, 10 years actually isn't that long either. I mean, we're still, firefighting every day, and literally, recently the door blew off on the roof, and because of the hurricane, and we had to rip the floor out by the toilets because somebody pissed all over the floor on Culture Night and wrecked the floorboards. So, what's my point with this? What I mean is 10 years has gone really quickly. It's been piecemeal. We've never had, the whole development of the place has just been so slow. I can't see Belfast without it. I would hate to think that it would be without it. I do think we've become a hub for musicians and young people and older people as well to come in and just do their thing musically.
Best night you've had at the Oh Yeah Centre?
I was talking about this to my colleague on the plane over. It's really difficult. See, when you work in this sector, you literally go from gig to gig and you bank it because you don't have time to decompress and think about it. So I've kind of forgotten loads of really amazing nights. But Ash did a fundraiser for us. I know Yeah is named after an Ash song, obviously. So they did a fundraiser for our under-18s project, which is called Volume Control, about 7 years ago, and they rammed the place, and it was amazing, and it was all 14, 15-year-old kids, and everybody singing it. So that was amazing. And all the kids involved in the project all went backstage and sort of hung out with them, and that was like, for me at that moment, it was like, this is why we do what we do.
And that's what it's all about. It's brilliant. Charlotte Dryden, ladies and gentlemen. It's hard picking a best gig, and I've been asked this on a few occasions. My current best ever gig, and if it's all right with you, I'm going to, in a second, just play you a little clip of the recording from the gig. But the reason I'm doing this is because we've already touched on how venues are part of a community, and it's not just, obviously, part of the important work that you do is encouraging new artists and nurturing new bands, but these places are more broad than that, and I think it's important that there's a place for a sort of counterculture, or for artists, older artists who aren't particularly popular, niche artists, that they've got somewhere to go as well. So this comes from a gig I was asked to put on by Six Music in 2009 at the Dublin Castle in Camden. If any of you know the Dublin Castle, or if you don't know it, 200 people max, maybe, with a shoehorn and a pot of grease. I mean, you probably get maybe 200 in. And what I put on, there were 3 new bands on the bill, and I thought, well, we'll drive some audience in by booking Billy Bragg. And Bill very kindly said, yeah, I'll come and do it. And this is right at the end of his set, where he's playing a New England. This is Billy Bragg live at the Dublin Castle.
Once upon a time at home I sat beside the telephone, waiting for someone to pull me through, and when I lost it didn't ring, I knew it wasn't you. Last chance! I don't want to change the world. I'm not looking for New England. I'm looking for New England. I don't want to change the world. I'm not looking for New England. I'm looking for another girl.
This applause goes on for 5 minutes. I have to fade it out myself. Whenever I'm trying to explain to people the attraction, the allure, the power of a small venue, of a grassroots venue, whenever I'm having conversations, even with kids, about what it is and why you should go out and see live music, when people say, well, why do you go to these little venues? Whenever I get into one of those conversations, I want to play them that clip and just say to them, do you think that if you went to a bigger venue, anything else, do you think that you will ever have as good a time, as moving a moment as that audience had at that particular time of their lives? Because that, to me, is hairs on the back of your neck, and was so emotional that even Billy Bragg now came in last week and said he's now going back to start doing some smaller gigs again based on the communication with the crowd, the atmosphere, and the feeling of playing in those gigs. And that's what we're about here today, I think. Thanks. We've got another guest for you now, whose biog simply says, winging it at the Wedge since 1998 from the Portsmouth Wedgwood Rooms. Jeff Priestley. Still winging it?
Still winging.
Learnt anything?
No.
Nothing?
Well, a little bit.
How much did you know when you started promoting?
Very little. Not as much as I know now in terms of... what did I know? I don't know, but I knew bits. I knew bits of things. I was a techie, so I know a bit of things about that. And now I appear to know lots of things like how to unblock drains in the middle of a rainstorm. Useful skills like that. But yeah, you sort of learn. You have to adapt. That's the joy of being there for a long time. And that's the fun. That's just changing, isn't it? That's the fun.
Do you think there's a certain temperament that makes for a good promoter?
Good promoter, yeah.
Or venue runner. Or anything,
venue manager, I think.
Venue manager.
What do you have to do? Yes, stay calm when all around you isn't, and just generally wade your way through what everybody's saying and make a decision is what it boils down to, because at the end of the day, somebody has to.
So what do you think over the past, because what is it, 20 years then, what's changed in how you work and what you do?
Obviously, technology's changed, and as we discussed earlier, marketing's changed, although we still send people out putting posters up and handing flyers out because old school still works, but obviously we spend a lot of time. Somebody I brought with me spends most of his day on the internet telling people what we're up to. You have to.
So has that made things easier, do you think? Or
No. I don't. I don't think it does. I think it changes your customer base in that I think when the Wedge started, it was very Portsmouth, and it was very Portsmouth focused because you didn't get the information out unless people read NME, whereas now we have a whole load of people coming to the venue down most of the artery roads within a 50, 60 mile radius. So that has changed that. It allows you to hit a bigger audience. Yes, which helps.
I mean, and is that something else? Have you noticed the audience changing that come to the gigs in any way?
Well, predominantly they're getting older and seem to want a chair, which is a new thing. Do you have chairs?
But is that? I mean, I suppose that is a point, though, isn't it? That we're all slightly worried about where the next generation is going to come from. Yeah. You don't want your audience to get so old that they can't get to the chair.
No, but in saying that, I've got 3 boys. The oldest 20, and to be honest, I didn't encourage him to come into the Wedge because you don't want your children hanging around in rock and roll venues. But he's now in Cardiff. He's putting gigs on. He's always gone to live gigs. He really loves it. So the young audience is there. I'm not sure whether, and there are lots of young people in bands, but they do seem to disappear quite quickly.
Yeah, in their 20s and stuff. I think you're right. I think there's a point point where some just, they give it a crack, and then if it doesn't work, they go off and get a job as well.
Or they go off and go to festivals every summer.
Yeah, I suppose so. What's your biggest challenge, particularly being where you are geographically down on the south coast?
Quite a lot, really. I think it's no secret that Portsmouth's always been a hard place to sell tickets. Even though we're an island, you would think that you could appeal to most people there, but that's quite difficult. But the key with everything else is predicting change and moving yourself along with it. I mean, we have people at the Wedge that have been there a very long time, that have a lot of experience that you can call on. But I love it when we get new people in because you need those in to help you steer where the place is going. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. What would make life better for you?
For me, be about 20 years younger would help.
What could we do? I mean, if we gave you some money, what would you do with it?
Well, it's funny because somebody I know has just written their MA on the Wedge, and accordingly we're dripping in community involvement, and we're dripping in everybody loves us and everything. But the key thing we're not dripping in is money, and that's always the key. Is actually, because not only do you have to move yourself forward in a programming way, you have to move yourself forward technologically. Now, we've still got an old Midas analog mixing desk. Most people are asking for digital desks that come through. I don't have 10 grand lying around because actually the roof is leaking, and that's a priority. So some sort of input from somewhere would help just to take the strain off, I think.
We were talking backstage, weren't we, about just money and where it comes from, and obviously making the sort of argument economically. Where do we go to? Do you go to try and find arts funding, or is it the industry? I think in some cases the industry doesn't do enough, really, knowing that. I mean, it makes all the money at the end game with the bigger artists, but it doesn't then give you anything back for having done all the hard work in launching the bands in the first place.
No, I mean, we put the graft in and give the people a place to start from. And everybody else reaps the rewards of doing that, apart from us who've still got a leaky roof. Yeah.
I was suggesting that we could make an amendment to some bands' contracts when they come through and play for the first time, that you agree to pay them 200 quid, but there's a clause in their contract that says if they ever play Wembley Arena, they have to then pay you 10 grand. Seems fair, you put the investment in, why not? They wouldn't notice it. Dev Shoe, give us some money back, it's only fair. Best night that you've had at the Wedgwood Rooms?
Best night?
Best night you can remember?
Yeah, it's all a bit of a blur after 20 years. The last Slaves gig was pretty sweaty, which is always good, and had the same effect as the tape you played. But because of what we are, because we always try and move forward, really, your best gig is the next one, isn't it? Otherwise, if it's not, then you're not going to be there. So you have to put that effort in to get the next gig to be the exciting one for the people that do turn up.
Brilliant. Jeff Priestley, everybody. Oh, I mentioned how old I was earlier on. Here's a young man joining us. He's been promoting gigs since something like the age of 12 or 13 from the Cheese and Grain down in Somerset. Rob Dahl. By the way, guests, do help yourself to microphones if you want to chip in at any point. I love the fact that Jeff's gone right down the end. What have I done?
Well, it was your birthday yesterday, wasn't it? So you might be scared. How hard was it last night?
It wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be.
Okay.
Is that right? 12 or 13? You were really
12,
young.
yeah.
12 when you put on your first gig. Can you tell us what that was?
I just didn't have any musical talent. All my friends were in bands, and I was just like, I want to be cool as well. And the only way that I could do it is just like, well, if I can't be in a band, I can put the bands on. And my parents regretted that straight away because they were like, oh, so we're going to have to pay for this? And I was like, probably, but kids like me, Mum.
And did you do this, all the way through school?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, the school kind of loved it because they were like, oh, we've got the student who's just like, they can do kind of not the poster boy, but they were like, oh, yeah, you're putting on all the bands. It's like, we definitely helped, and they definitely didn't. It was just like, you can't put posters up in a school, but yeah, when it was press release time, it's just like, yeah, let's get photos with you. But no, it was really fun, and it's, when you're that inexperienced, you can get away with murder, because it's just like, well, I'm just a stupid kid, and I'm still probably just a stupid kid, but I don't have the excuse anymore, so I was much better at my job back then, probably.
So did you always know what you were going to do then? It was always going to be live music?
Yeah, well, that's kind of what I've always wanted. I mean, I've started promoting the venue I'm at now, so I've had the same job for 18 years, which is depressing in some ways and amazing in other ways. But yeah, I kind of like the job that I've got now, the program manager at the Cheese and Grain, is the job that I kind of always wanted, which probably sounds depressing to everyone else because want to be an astronaut or something cool, but it's just like that's the job that I always had in mind.
How, when you were younger, how did you convince people to work with you? Did bands literally turn up and go, where's the promoter? He's the one in short trousers over there.
Pretty much, yeah.
Wow.
But when you're sending emails, because I was started promoting just as email was coming mainly a thing on the internet, so you can't really. I've always been okay at English. My speaking today will not represent that, but. Yeah, you kind of can't really tell the tone, and so, sometimes you've got responses going, "What, you're the promoter?" And it was hilarious. But bands were very supportive once they kind of got on board on that, and so were agents to a certain degree, because I think they wanted to cultivate that. So I think it's great to get in promoters that young. I think it actually needs more of that, because people working young in the industry is where the new people kind of come from.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's the way forward, I think.
Tell us a bit about the Cheese and Grain. I've never been to the Cheese and Grain, so you're going to have to tell us a little bit about it.
We're an 850 standing capacity venue, 500 seated in the town of Frome, which I'm sure you all know, because compared to everywhere else, it's the heartland of music. We're about 10 miles away from the Glastonbury site, which is the only way anyone in the music industry knows where we are, I should say. So kind of near Bath, kind of near Glastonbury, and yeah, we've been going 20 years now, and we've got some good bands. You should come down, Steve.
What sort of things do you specialise in then? Do you find, what sort of things attract the local audience?
Well, everything. I mean, the classic stories, we had the Foo Fighters one night, and then we had the Potato and Seed Swap show the next day. So we do everything.
Foo Fighters as a Glastonbury warm-up, I suppose, was it?
Yeah, they did their announcement, and it was viewed by 22 million people, which is online, which is amazing for us. Yeah. But now it's the struggle of, oh, you're the Foo Fighters venue, and it's just like, well, we've been going, 18, 19 years before they showed up, so it's great that they came. And I tell everyone, the drunker I get telling the Foo Fighters story has become, me and Dave Grohl are now best friends. Where I don't think I even met him on the day, but it's you've got to exaggerate these stories.
Do you? And I suppose there's a question to everyone up here. Do you feel, working with a little community around you, do you feel a responsibility for your audience? Do you think, I wonder what, I want to do the best I can for them. I want to put something on that they like. Do you know what I mean? Yeah,
well, I mean, especially when it's such a kind of tight-knit community, it's a very small town, everyone knows who you are. You can't go to the pub without, oh, my kid's in a band, or my brother's in a band, or I once saw this band, why aren't you booking them? And, there is a responsibility to, book kind of what people like, especially locally. I think, a lot of local people kind of feel that they own the venue, which is great in some respects, but in other respects it makes life very, very difficult, because everything you put is kind of under a microscope, and you know everyone, and everyone knows where to find you. But it's good that people care that much. So, I shouldn't say that it's a bad thing, but it can be frustrating at times, because, people don't necessarily see the overlining picture. They just see what you're doing at one stage, and, why are you booking that band? And it's great, and it's frustrating, and it's lovely, but that's running venue. That's going to be the answer to everything for running venues. It's great, it's frustrating, but that's why we do it.
Yeah. Do they come and request bands? I always wondered this, whether people walk into a venue and say, can you put so-and-so on?
Oh, all the time. And the problem is, once you've put on the Foo Fighters, you can't announce it. You do an announcement saying, we've got a show coming up soon, we're going to announce it on Monday. It's like, it's Foo Fighters, isn't it? It's because Dave Grohl on stage said, oh, I'll come back to Frome. And I was like, no, Dave, you won't. And now every time it's just like, oh, we're going to announce a show, and it's something completely, it's the Wurzels, your favourite band, as we were talking about.
Yeah.
The Wurzels announcement seems less exciting, because you can't always have the Foo Fighters, sadly, apparently.
What are your main frustrations in the job?
Well, apart from
not in life, obviously. I don't know.
Too long. Apart from my assistant Lucas always being late wherever I'm not even sure he's made it here yet.
He hasn't turned up. Yeah,
no,
there you go.
Definitely hasn't brought me the pint I requested yet. Anyway, but no, I think it's just it's trying to sell people on the idea of Frome, because Frome has got lots of little towns near it that don't have venues. It's got kind of the catchment area of a city without the other distractions of a city. But being close to Bath, being close to Bristol, trying to sell people on that we're as good as Bath or as good as Bristol, because a lot of bands, promoters, agents would rather have Bristol on the poster rather than Frome, because it seems backwards to have us on the thing, even if we'll sell more tickets and with a bigger venue, which can be frustrating. I totally understand why they do it, but at the same time, it's just like, but we're not the better venue, but for certain shows, we are the better venue.
That's Rob Dole, ladies and gentlemen. I was going to play in a clip of the Wurzels there, but I'm going to save that now. I mean, the agent point is interesting because we're going to be talking about agents quite a lot, I think, with our next guest. Just before we do this, and this I think is another really important point, and one which Ben Lovett. Does anyone see the story about some of the great Music Venue Trust team appearing at the DCMS committee last week? Ben Lovett came up with this amazing thing, which I think, and I touched on this last year, that one of the really important jobs that a grassroots venue does when it does it well is act as a gatekeeper, a tastemaker. We don't, in a lot of cases, in a lot of towns where there's no record shops anymore, there's no one behind the counter who's giving you their authoritative and informed opinion. Whereas what we need is more people who we can trust, who can tell us what is good that's out there, because there's so much stuff which is out there. And the next venue is classic for me in that it does that job, because every time I see a band playing this venue, I give them a sort of mental tick that they must be doing quite well, because I think it's a really important, well-run venue with a very good reputation. And from the Southampton Joiners, Mandy Betts. I think actually Ben Lovett actually said, and I think this is the thing, because he was basically saying if we leave taste-making in music just to algorithms and streaming services, then we run the danger of our future culture being curated by robots, which I think is a really good point. It's true though, isn't it? Southampton Joiners has a great reputation for putting on bands who are going somewhere or are worth a look.
Yeah, obviously, excuse me, probably more so in previous years. I think the last person who became, or the last person to play the Joiners who became extraordinarily big was Ed Sheeran. And we haven't had anybody through since then that's really made it so huge. But of course we do have the wonderful Creeper, who are obviously getting very well known and are huge supporters of the Joiners as well.
I mean, but there's something which just says if you're doing that tour, there is a certain tour which has got, you know, maybe Club E for back on it, and it's got venues around the country. If I see a band like Blinders doing that tour and they're stopping off at the Joiners, I think there's something happening here. And I came down to see Catfish and the Bottlemen at the Joiners on that same sort of tour on the way up, and you just think, all right, I get it. If they're doing that, then basically the venue's done some of the work for us, and it's endorsed what I'd sort of previously only suspected, that there's something going on here, I think. But I mean, the reputation thing is important, because you then have to sort of build some sort of trust with your audience, don't you? I guess the local audience.
Yeah.
You don't want three stinkers, and they're going to think twice about coming.
Yeah, it's. I mean, we have a really, really loyal following. We're really lucky. Not that everybody goes out probably as much as they used to, and of course, you can debate it to the end of the planet, but a huge amount of young audiences do save a huge amount of money for the festival season, which is when we really suffer. But I think to sum up, because I started to lose heart a bit, because we really are crucified for those 3 or 4 months of the year, and we really struggle to recover. And last year, in June, all of a sudden, I just said to Ricky Bates, who you probably all know, I'm sure, our promoter, our roof is leaking. We're going to struggle to pay the rent. I have no idea how we are going to get through the summer, and I don't know what to tell people. We're going to have to crowdfund, and we've never done it. And within 48 hours, we got the crowdfunding up and running. We asked for $2,500 to fix the roof. We had that in 2.5 hours. In 3 weeks, we had £9,500. So it just shows that the loyalty is there. A lot of it from the history of the place. You know, even people that don't go anymore. I can sit on a plane going to the States and I'll sit next to somebody and they'll go, oh, the Joiners, I went to university in Southampton, love the place, you know. So, and that funding came from all over the country. Anywhere from like a £5 to one person who put in £1,000. And obviously it was boosted by the wonderful Frank Turner. You know, so sometimes when I just go, okay, maybe it isn't as important as I think it is, and then something like that happens, you realise how you just have to keep these doors open.
Again, this is something for everyone sitting around here. How much does it basically take over your life?
How much?
Does it take over your life being involved in a venue like this?
Well, the daytime I have a lot of animals, so I kind of concentrate on them, and night times I just don't sleep thinking about where the next bill is going to be paid from. Yeah. So yeah, it does. It's always there in the background. I've kind of been able to learn to live after 4 years now, because I just do all the financial side of things. I've kind of been able to live with the fact that there is some kind of good ghost at the Joiners, that somehow something will happen and it will get paid. And so far that has been, you know, it's been the case. Everybody says, you know, there's an angel looking over the place. It's certainly not my bank manager, but it does seem to manage to just, you know, it just managed to keep going, but there is always a concern. And I'm surrounded by people who have no concept, and they'll admit it, they've got no concept of money and budgets and what it takes and what it costs. And because I'm kind of good at pulling things out of the bag, if I say I can't pay the business rates, they go, yeah, you know, and then I'll lay awake and worry about it for a week before I come up with some kind of solution. So there is a lot, you know, there is a lot of that on me, and it does, yeah, it is a concern, but it's just something I've learned to live with.
Something else which was a concern which we were talking about before coming out here is dealing with agents and the attitude of agents. Again, you're down on the south coast, you know, bands come in, they might do a 12-date tour, they might miss you out. You've got to compete to get bands. And I don't know what your relationship is like with agents down at the Joiners. You see, in my head, I would think, oh, it must be really good because it's a great little venue, and you're shaking your head.
It's very hard. It's a very sensitive subject. When we first came in 4 years ago, my husband has rehearsal rooms, and he always wanted, you know, for so long he's wanted a venue. So then the Joiners came up, the business came up at the Joiners, and we took a huge leap of faith. It was massively in debt. We're still paying the debts off now 4 years later. So I bought the business and then found out that nobody actually knew how to run it. So I ended up getting as involved as I did. And our promoters used to say, you know, I'd say, can you send out a letter to all the agents and just say it's under new management, the bills are going to be paid, you know, we need to rebuild the relationship, nobody's going to get upset anymore. And he said, they won't read it. And I said, well, we'll do it anyway. He said, yeah, but they won't read it. And then something came up and I had to have a conversation with one of them, and they were just incredibly rude. And I said, Ricky, you know, I'm, at the time, 49. I'm from a very professional background. I used to earn an awful lot of money, and I work with very polite people. Why are they being so rude to me? And he said, because they don't care. And I said, but why do you put up with it? And he said, because for two reasons. One of them is because, obviously, you want to keep the venue going, and secondly, because we are actually outside what is now quite a small touring area, where they stop at Bristol or they'll stop at Brighton. So for two reasons, I have to take it. I just have to take it. And, but he said, but I'm fine with that. You know, if anybody knows Ricky Bates, he bounces off the walls, he's nothing, you cut him open, it'll be Joiners through and through. You know, he lives and dies for the venue. It's probably cost him ever owning his own house or having a stable relationship. You know, 4 years later, he's actually saying to me, do you know what? I was so upset they did that. I've put so much work into that. I've moved probably a 60% capacity to other venues to accommodate these agents whose bands I've actually got onto festival stages this year who probably shouldn't even have been there. And I get these 2 promised sellout shows, and I say, okay, you've got to confirm in 24 hours. A week later, I've heard nothing. I went back, and the assistant said, no, one of them's not touring anymore, and the other one, the manager booked it, and the band didn't want to do a warm-up show. So I said, ring his boss. He said, oh, no, you won't listen. And I said, ring his boss. Well, so he did. And his boss said, what bands? So my promoter, who is literally the lifeblood of the Joiners, is now at the point of saying, I feel really shit on. And do you know, if I'd had to put my last penny on that never having happened, I would have, but it has. And so I don't know if it's because he's a little bit older now or whatever, and he's put so much work into this, and he puts so many hours into this, and he earns next to nothing. And then and he does everybody favors, he works himself stupid, and there is no loyalty. He feels that there is no loyalty.
Yeah, not just no loyalty, but maybe lack of understanding, do you think?
Absolutely, and as we were saying downstairs, what we think would be a really, really good maybe a really good practice is that the assistants of the agents, as part of their training, actually get out onto the grassroots music venue, go and talk to the people in the venues that they're booking places in, go and understand what we're up against, and not just be somebody with a job at the end of a phone.
Well, maybe you could get Ricky to book them a tour, and then they can go on tour and learn what it's like as life on the road. And then maybe pull one of the dates the day before. Don't know. Years the Joiners has been going, though. I mean, I know because when I came down with Six Music for Indie Venue Week and talking to Pat, and basically, him saying, we might know that we're going to be able to pay the rent 2 days before the end of the month. So if we're lucky, we've got all the money in place with a week to go. Sometimes it's the night before. I mean, even given that, where do you see yourself going, and do you have a plan for the future apart from making sure you're there at the end of next month?
When I went to talk to Ricky the other night, and he was really low, and I said to him, look, you're doing everything you can do, and I'm doing everything I can do, and neither one of us are doing anything wrong. He's very learned, he's got a huge amount of knowledge, he knows where to go, he knows what's coming, he knows what to book. I know how to creatively run the books. So
everyone knows what that means, don't they?
Who doesn't? Who doesn't creatively know how to run the books of a grassroots music venue? So my accountant knows I creatively know how to run the books of a grassroots music venue. So, and I said to him, if the Joiners closes, Ricky, it's not going to be down to us. It will be market forces. That's all that's going to happen. It will be what it will be, but we're doing everything we can. There's no magic solution, but I think it's very clear what happened in 2000, up to about 2001, 2002, I'd seen the books, I'd seen the figures, and we are missing exactly a third of the revenue that used to come in then, and that's due to the festival season, to the agents locking the bands down. They can't play within 30 miles of the venue for 3 months, and it's getting bigger and bigger. So that's the chunk that we're missing, and that's the chunk that we need covered. And I think that there's a historical thought among people that give money away that we're all still making loads of money. Otherwise, we wouldn't be in existence. But because of the way that the festivals have come along, we're not making that kind of money. And I even had to go to our landlord recently and say, look, the rent you were charging was based on this turnover. And he didn't understand that. And I said, and I did my facts and figures around the rents in Southampton. And I said, so theoretically, I can show you our turnover, which is a third less than it was when you were charging this rent. And bless him, he did drop the rent, not by a third, but by something, to bring it more in line. but continually having to go cap in hand to people, because the way things are at the moment, if we're not supported, and if people don't wake up, then us as a base stone isn't going to be there. And then what is everybody going to do?
Well, what are all the festivals going to do? I mean, this is a very good point. In fact, one we'll pick up with our next guest. In the meantime, Mandy Betts, everybody. Because here's someone who, again, was one of the team who was speaking at the DCMS committee meeting last week in front of a bunch of politicians. A man who knows the game because he's been around and in it for many, many years. Ladies and gentlemen, from the legendary 100 Club, Jeff Horton. So what was it like? I've never been to one of those select committee things. I saw some footage of you. You looked like you were doing very well. But I mean, it must be odd. You sit down in front of 8 politicians, and you've got 5 minutes to tell them what the score is.
I was in my element, to be honest with you. I think if a chance to actually go to speak to the people who make a difference happens, you've got to grasp it with both hands and speak as honestly and as passionately as I feel, as all this panel here do, about grassroots live music venues and the unique problems that we all face. And to be honest with you, there was a lot of positivity that came back. Joe Stevens, the MP for Cardiff Central, was particularly engaging, seemed to understand the issues we're up against. But all you can do, really, as I say, is seize the opportunity, and it's up to them. But at least we've managed to have our say, and we've managed to speak face-to-face to people about the issues that we face, and also, which I pointed out, the wider consequence for everybody, because I think if live music venues continue to fall off a cliff, there's going to be huge implications, as I said, to everybody. You know, tourism's going to start getting affected. I think the festivals are going to start getting affected. All of us run vehicles which continually bring through amazing talent that end up headlining festivals. I did some research when I co-wrote the report for the Music Venue Trust 3 years ago, and the 100 Club had 70% of the festival headliners at British festivals have played the 100 Club at some point, and I'm sure that's the same for all our venues as well.
So it's exactly what you're saying, really, or what we're joining up the argument as. The festivals hoover up a load of the audience and the money during the summer.
Yep.
For people to go and see the bands that you've spent all the time.
Well, I mean, a case in point is I said to you earlier on, we had Muse play the club back in, I think it was 96, 97, and the promoter lost, I think, 400 quid each night.
Yeah. So.
And they're now doing easily 8-9 nights at the O2 at 19,000 people a night. I mean. Yeah.
And did you get the impression that the politicians sort of understood what you were talking about and that they were enthusiastic to the cause, or were they there because it kind of looked credible?
Well, I don't think they really understand live grassroots music venues. No, I don't think they're the sort of places that they go to. Do
you think they understood the argument that financially, though, it's an important starting point for the British music industry, which generates an awful lot of money in tax?
Exactly. And that was the point I tried to do, is try to paint the bigger picture. We all did, all the guys are on the panel, and just to explain that this isn't just about grassroots music venues. I mean, you know, I'm sure there aren't many of you that care too much if, say, the 100 Club shuts, but have you thought about the bigger consequence? Have you thought of the effects, as I said, of the nighttime industry, of tourism, the festival circuit? You know, there's already lots of bands that I know that are coming out over, say, from America. There's been loads of examples this year at the club, but they've done one show at the club and then continued the rest of the tour around Europe because they're better paid and they're better looked after, because in Europe there's support from local authority for music, and that just isn't the case over here.
And would you worry that people just get out of the habit of going to see bands? I mean, that's the other thing, and there's subsidies around Europe, but what I get from bands is, yeah, we turned up in this place, 150 people came out on a Tuesday night, you know. Only 50 of them have ever heard of us, but there's a culture of going out.
Seriously, I mean, the other thing that gets me is, you know, people talk about the lost generation of kids coming through that aren't interested in live music. That's not what I see at all. You know, people say that kids are just interested in, you know, social media and whatever and doing everything through a screen. But, you know, quite recently we've done loads and loads of nights where we specifically aim for sort of people under 25 and stuff, because everyone over 40, 50 knows the 100 Club, but actually there has been a generation of people who don't know much about it. So we've done a couple of shows recently with grime artists and new emerging artists, and the place has been absolutely packed. So, I think, you know, there's definitely audiences out there. Unfortunately, the places for them to go to see this are disappearing over a cliff.
Yeah. I mean, you've obviously seen over the past 10 years venues all around the West End of London closing or being bulldozed to the ground. How have you managed to stay in? What are the challenges managing to stay alive where you are?
Well, there's two things. The first is that we have a huge amount of history and heritage. We are the oldest running live music venue anywhere on the globe. And so there's two things. A lot of people want to come because of that. But also, we've very fortunately managed to forge two really good relationships with two big companies, originally Converse and now Fred Perry. And the guy that was the GM of Converse, Richard Copcutt, he actually used to be a drummer in a punk band called the Souls of Destruction, who used to support UK subs and English Dogs and stuff like that.
Is that what you've got over him then? Is that why he had to sign the deal?
We actually banned him from the club once as well, but that's another story. But I've never had that conversation of how he went from being the drummer in a punk band at the 100 Club in like 1981 to the GM of Converse. But fortunately for me, he did, because we had a big fallout with the landlords back in 2010, and I basically went to the press because I've been trying to ask them to help us out and wasn't getting anywhere. So I just knew at the end of 2010 that if we carried on trading, we'd be trading while insolvent, so they could come after me personally. So I made my mind up we were going to finish. And this story went out in the Evening Standard, and in the back of a cab reading this was Richard, and he came to see me and he just said, "Look, I love this place. This means everything to me, and I'm now in a position where I can help you. What do you want from us?" So we spoke about a certain amount of figure in sponsorship and stuff, and he signed it off straight away. So that's the only reason, really, why we're still here. And then, you know, obviously, Converse decided at the end of 2016 they'd had enough, which is fair enough. You know, we wouldn't be here without them. But I'd had a previous relationship with Fred Perry, and John Flynn, their chairman, said to me, "Look, Jeff, if this ever finishes between you and Converse, or they say it's coming to an end, please call me, because, you know, we really regret the fact that we weren't able to pick up the mantle at the time." So I spoke to John, and I think we had 2 meetings, and in 3 weeks they picked up where Converse left off. And, you know, they've just been absolutely brilliant. For us, you know, with the rents we have, we're in some of the most expensive real estate anywhere in the world. Business rates have just gone up 47%. I'm now paying £1,500 a week in business rates.
Whoa. Stop. How much?
1,500 a week, yeah. They went up from, I think we were paying 48,000. Then when the re-evaluation came in 2016, they went up to 72. They're now 75. So if you work it out, it's about 1,500 a week in business rates alone. So without a sponsor like Fred Perry, we wouldn't be here. It's as simple as that.
So this is what we have to change. We have to get to someone to make the 100 Club economically more viable.
Yeah.
That's what has to change. Otherwise, we're always going to be at the behest of, I mean, bless them, Fred Perry and Converse, but it shouldn't always be like that, should it?
No, it shouldn't. And, you know, so I've done things like I've applied for every kind of relief there is. I had to go to this board meeting last year to apply for hardship relief with Westminster Council. And I walked into this venue near Trafalgar Square, and there's me one side of a table and 7 people on the other. Now, I've never been to a parole board meeting before in my life, but I'd imagine there's similarities to it. And I had to sit there and sort of open all my sort of accounts to all these 7 strangers while they asked me all these questions about why wasn't I paying my business rates. And it's like, well, you've just put it up 47%. Actually, why am I having to come here and apply for hardship relief? My family have been paying business rates for 60 odd years. Why am I having to come here and apply for hardship relief? It's humiliating, really. Because I'm not sure if many people know, but the 100 Club's have actually been in my family since 1958. So we've been paying business rates since then. And it's like, I've now got to apply for hardship relief because you've put them up 47%. It's mad.
I've got one last question because I'm being told time's up. My one last question is, with all this, I mean, we were talking even earlier on about having to go and talk about licences. The bane of everyone's life is getting the licence, changing the licence, the capacity and the fire regs, health, all these things. With that and the worries about money, do you still enjoy it? Can you still enjoy it even with all the headaches?
Do you know what, Steve? Seriously, I love it more than ever. I'm absolutely passionate about what I do, and I think it's a God-given right that places like all of ours should still remain for the people who haven't experienced it yet, the future generations to come. And one of the things that I deliberately do is, I sound like my dad now, but I kind of try and give people the same gig and experience I had. So there's no barriers. You won't see lines of like high-vis security in front of the stage. You know, I want it to be like when I went and saw the Specials in 1980 or when I saw the Clash in 1977. And I think people respond to that. You know, we had a show with Paul McCartney, funnily enough, who came to highlight the importance of the club when I thought we were going to shut. And I had a big conversation with Barry, his manager, who said, look, you know, the production's coming in at 11 o'clock, then we're going to put the barrier in. I went, what barrier? And he went, well, we're going to put a barrier in because it's Paul McCartney. And I went, but it's the 100 Club. You know, he's got to do it the same as the 100 Club, like everyone else. And he went, Jeff, it's the 18th of December. It's very close to the anniversary that John Lennon was assassinated. And when this happens, we get every lunatic in the world email us or ring us up saying they're going to do this to Paul, they're going to do that to Paul. So Paul McCartney playing at your venue is a really good thing. Paul McCartney dying in your venue is a really bad thing. Let's put the barrier in.
Ladies and gentlemen, Jeff Horton. In fact, can we have a round of applause for all our guests, for Mandy Betts, Rob Dahl, Jeff Priestley, Charlotte Dryden and Elaine McGinty. I've been Steve Lamacq. Thanks very much for coming. Enjoy your day.